My name is Emily Rhodes. I'm 33 years old, and I work as a biomedical systems engineer in Seattle. But long before I ever touched a microscope or held a soldering iron, I learned something far more elemental in my family. Love had a spotlight, and I was always standing in the shadows. At my 10th birthday, I sat alone in the kitchen eating a slice of store-brand pound cake while my mother orchestrated Sierra's half-birthday photo shoot with a professional photographer in the backyard. No one remembered mine. When I got a national scholarship in high school, my dad grunted, "Does it come with a check?" But when Sierra got cast as Juliet in a local play, he rented a tux. I wasn't bitter back then. I was invisible. And invisibility I thought was easier than fighting to be seen. But one day, I stopped being the quiet sister. And when I did, everything changed. Growing up in the Rhodes household was like being in a play where I was never cast. My younger sister Sierra, born with dimples and golden curls, had a laugh that lit up rooms and a mother who followed that light like a sunflower to the sun. My mother, Denise, embroidered Sierra's initials on her bed sheets, handmade Halloween costumes for her every year, and organized just because tea parties with paper lanterns and rosewater lemonade. For me, well, I learned how to boil ramen before I learned how to braid my hair. My father, Martin, once a respected investigative journalist, had long since retreated into the shell of disappointment and missed deadlines. He rarely spoke to me directly, but when he did, it felt like being summoned, not spoken to. He wasn't cruel, just cold, distant, like I was one of the filing cabinets he used to work with, necessary but never worth opening unless something went wrong. I was the quiet child, the smart one though, even that was said with a shrug. I buried myself in books about stars and cells and machines, things that moved predictably unlike people. I didn't rebel, I didn't shout, I didn't ask for more. I thought if I just achieved enough, they'd notice. But they didn't. The summer I turned 15, I was awarded the Washington State Scholars Grant. Only 20 students statewide received it. My guidance counselor was ecstatic. I stood on a stage in Olympia. The governor handed me the plaque. My parents weren't in the audience. They were driving Sierra to a modeling audition in Vancouver. I took a photo with my certificate in front of the Capitol building, smiled through clenched teeth, and texted it to my mom. She replied, "Nice. Don't get a big head." Meanwhile, Sierra got a Sweet 16 bash with a live DJ, a monogrammed ice sculpture, and a custom gown. My 16th birthday. A text message that read, "Happy B-Day. Hope school's going well." But the most painful part wasn't the absence, it was how normal it had become. I stopped expecting applause. I stopped announcing good news. I taped my honor roll letters inside my closet where no one else would see them. I learned how to be small. But you can only shrink for so long before something inside you stretches out and refuses to be folded again. And that moment, the moment I finally unfolded, was still waiting down the road. I left home the morning I turned 18. There was no goodbye, no packed lunch, no whispered wishes of good luck. Just the sound of the front door clicking shut behind me, and the weight of a scholarship letter folded neatly in my backpack. I had been accepted into UC Berkeley's bioengineering program with full tuition. It was more than an opportunity, it was oxygen. I boarded the Greyhound bus from Tacoma with a duffel bag, $140 in cash, and a secondhand laptop with a cracked hinge. As the city blurred behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, the possibility of escape. Berkeley was bright and unforgiving. I worked 3 part-time jobs, library shelver, lab assistant, and weekend barista, just to afford groceries and rent in a shared apartment with 2 other students. Some nights, I fell asleep on top of textbooks. Some mornings, I skipped breakfast to afford ink cartridges or cough medicine. But I never called home. I told myself it was principle. Maybe it was pride. Maybe both. In my 2nd semester, I started skipping meals more often than I meant to. The silence in my room grew heavier than the equations on my whiteboard. I stopped going out, stopped responding to classmates. One of my professors pulled me aside after a lab session and gently handed me the number to student wellness. That week, I was diagnosed with mild depression. That was when I met Alex Tran. He was a grad student in mechanical engineering, sharp, sarcastic, and oddly kind in quiet ways. Half Vietnamese, half German, he'd grown up between cultures and knew the ache of never fully belonging. He started showing up with tea protein bars and bad science puns scrawled on Post-it notes. I'd find them in my textbooks. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. But you, Emily, are the powerhouse of survival. We became close. Not romantic, but something steadier. He never pushed, never pried. He just stayed. In silence or in sarcasm, he reminded me I was more than what I'd been made to feel. Alex was the first person in my life who didn't ask me to prove my worth just to exist. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to hide my joy when something good happened. I started rebuilding quietly, slowly, but this time on my terms. By the time I turned 30, I had stopped trying to earn anyone's praise. But I hadn't stopped building. After graduating from Berkeley, I accepted an offer from Rhodes, a biotech firm headquartered in Seattle, where I worked on molecular diagnostic systems. The job paid decently, not extravagantly, but I wasn't chasing luxury. I was chasing freedom. For nearly a decade, I lived like every dollar had to prove its value. No vacations, no brand names, no new phones unless the old one died. I packed my lunch every single day, reused coffee filters, and learned how to mend my own clothes. My coworkers thought I was quirky. Maybe I was, but they didn't know I had a number written on a sticky note inside my sock drawer, $250,000. That was my down payment goal. It took me almost 10 years, but I reached it. Right after my 32nd birthday, I signed a contract on a 3-bedroom home in Bothell, just north of Seattle. The house wasn't flashy, no marble counters or smart mirrors, but it had a wraparound porch, a narrow backyard with wild cherry trees, and a small attic I imagined one day turning into a reading nook. The total price was $500,000, and I'd saved enough to put nearly half down. But the most important part wasn't the mortgage. It was the silence. The good kind. No one else's footsteps. No TVs blaring at full volume. No sighs of disappointment in the kitchen. Just me, my plants, and the gentle whir of the HVAC system. I spent weekends painting walls, sanding cabinets, and choosing curtains with the kind of care most people reserved for wedding dresses. Every nail I hammered, every light bulb I replaced, was a quiet rebellion against everything I'd once been told I wasn't worth. One spring morning, after planting hydrangeas along the fence line, I sat on my porch swing with a glass of iced tea and wrote a postcard to my childhood address. Just a few words centered on the page, "I'm doing fine. No need to worry." I didn't expect a reply. I didn't want one. I just wanted them to know that without their praise, without their presence, I still made it. It had been over 3 years since I'd heard a single word from my family. No calls, no birthdays, no accidental forwarded emails. The silence had become so complete that it almost felt like peace. Then one rainy Thursday morning, as I sat in my kitchen reviewing lab reports over coffee, my phone buzzed. "Sender Mom. Message. Call me. It's urgent. Something about Sierra." I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Not a hi, not a hope you're well, just Sierra. Of course. Out of sheer curiosity, or maybe old instincts, I called. Her voice on the other end was tight and falsely sweet, like a dress that didn't quite fit. "Emily," she said, as if she'd just remembered I existed. "Sierra's engaged. It's a big deal. Nathaniel Gray, you've probably heard of him? He's in marketing, LA-based, very successful. The engagement party's next Saturday. We want you there. It's important. Want you there." The words clanged like an unfamiliar bell. A week later, I stood outside a rented mansion in Bellevue, the kind of place with stone fountains, manicured hedges, and valet parking. I pulled up in my 10-year-old Toyota, self-conscious but determined not to apologize for who I was. Inside, everything smelled of roses and money. There were champagne towers, crystal candle holders, and a string quartet playing soft jazz. I wore a navy sheath dress, modest and pressed, but I might as well have shown up in a janitor's uniform. When I walked in, no one turned. No one called out. I wasn't even on the guest list. Someone had to check with Miss Sierra before letting me through. Then I saw her. Sierra glowing in a silver dress, fingers adorned with diamonds, eyes scanning the room until they landed on me with a flicker of mild surprise, then dismissal. Her smile never wavered, but it didn't reach her eyes. Next to her stood Diana, her best friend since high school now, with a socialite air and a professionally done pout. Diana's eyes ran over me like I was an unscheduled maintenance call. "Oh," she said. "You're Sierra's sister." "Right, not Emily. Not welcome. Just that sister." I smiled, tight-lipped, and stepped further into the party. I could already feel it. Something wasn't right, and for once, I wasn't going to ignore it. It didn't take long for the mask to slip. About an hour into the party, after the toasts and laughter and endless clinking of champagne flutes, my mother approached me with a smile that didn't quite meet her eyes. "Come with me," she said softly, touching my elbow like we were about to share a sentimental moment. She led me through a hallway lined with floral arrangements into a side room, dim, quiet, and heavy with the smell of wax and roses. My father was already inside, standing near the fireplace, arms crossed. He didn't greet me. The door clicked shut behind us. "Emily." My mother began, her voice syrupy and rehearsed. "We've been thinking. You're in a good place now. You've got that house all to yourself, and you're not married." I said nothing. My gut already knew where this was going. My father jumped in, his tone clipped. "Sierra's about to start her life with a good man, a real future. That house of yours would be the perfect wedding gift. Spacious, quiet, a proper foundation for a couple." I blinked. "You want me to give them my house?" "Not give," my mother corrected quickly. "Transfer ownership. A gesture. A sisterly show of support. You're not using it to its full potential anyway." The absurdity of it made me laugh once sharp and bitter. "You mean the house I saved for, worked for, sacrificed for that house?" My father's jaw tightened. My mother kept smiling. "Don't be dramatic. You always made things harder than they needed to be." I opened my mouth to respond, but just then, my phone buzzed in my purse. I glanced down. A new LinkedIn message from a name I didn't recognize. "Avery Whitmore. You don't know me, but I'm Nathaniel Gray's ex-wife. Be careful. They're not what they seem." My pulse thudded in my ears. "I'm not giving them my house," I said, my voice low and steady. "This conversation is over." My mother's smile vanished. Her words came out like ice. "Don't embarrass us at the wedding, Emily. You've always been difficult, but this would be unforgivable." I looked at her then, not with anger, but clarity. She never saw me as family, only function. And I was done being useful. The wedding was held 2 weeks after the engagement party at a glass conservatory in Kirkland, surrounded by towering evergreens and glimmering lakes. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale. Inside it felt like a cage. I wore the same navy dress I'd worn to the engagement, ironed, polished, unremarkable. I arrived alone on time with a simple card and a gift I'd ordered off their registry, a set of monogrammed wine glasses. Nothing extravagant, nothing to provoke, But provocation didn't need much in my family. During the cocktail hour, as guests milled about with trays of hors d'oeuvres and champagne, my mother approached again. Her smile was back brittle and stretched too wide. "Just a moment," she said, lightly tugging at my arm. "Let's walk over here." She led me toward a curtained corner near the back of the reception hall. It smelled faintly of eucalyptus and candle smoke. I should have walked away, but some old reflex kept my feet moving. "We can still settle this," she whispered. "It'll look better if you do it now quietly. There's a notary here, Nathaniel's uncle. We prepared everything." My heart pounded. I already said no, and I meant it. Her eyes narrowed. "Why are you being so selfish? Your sister is starting her life. And I'm finally living mine," I said louder than I meant to. That's when it happened. She raised her hand and struck me. Open palm, right cheek, sharp and sudden and hot with humiliation. Gasps rippled behind me. I turned slowly to see that we weren't alone. A few guests stood frozen, including a tall man in a gray suit, phone raised instinctively. Julian Miles, Nathaniel's longtime friend, and as I would later remember, my lab partner from sophomore year of undergrad. He hadn't just witnessed it. He'd filmed it. Before I could catch my breath, my mother grabbed my wrist. Hard, trying to pull me away from the growing stares. "Let go of me," I snapped, yanking back. Julian stepped forward. "Let her go," he said loud and firm. "Or I'm calling the police." She did. But her eyes didn't blink. Julian already had his phone in hand, dialing. I stood there stunned and shaking, but taller somehow. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't retreat. I stood. I should have walked out then. After the slap, after the grip on my wrist, after Julian's voice cutting through the crowd like a blade, I should have just left. But as I turned to go, my father stepped out from the side hall, holding something heavy in his right hand. A sleek black projector base, likely from the equipment they used to play the couple's slideshow earlier. I didn't notice it at first. I only saw the fury in his face. "You humiliated your mother," he growled. "You brought this on yourself." "I'm leaving," I said, moving toward the exit, but I didn't get far. In one terrible instant, he raised the projector base above his head and swung. The impact came before pain. Just a deafening crack, then blinding white, and then the world tilted. I stumbled backward, knees buckling. My head hit the tiled floor with a dull thud, and the projector base clanged beside me. Then came the pain. Searing. Warm. Liquid. I reached up and touched my temple. My fingers came away red. Gasps erupted around me. Then screaming. Somewhere in the room, a glass shattered. I heard someone shout, "She's bleeding! Call 911! And then Nathaniel's voice panicked and sharp. What the hell is going on? I could barely open my eyes, but I saw feet rushing toward me. Diana screaming. Julian kneeling beside me, muttering, "You're okay. Stay awake. Just stay with me." I heard the distinct ping of a phone. Someone was live streaming. Of course they were. In 6 minutes, though, it felt like a lifetime, the police arrived. The music had stopped. Guests stood back against the walls, some crying, others frozen in place. Sierra sat near the head table, her dress pristine, her expression cracked and hollow. 2 officers stormed in, and when they saw me on the floor, one immediately turned to my father. "Sir, drop what's in your hand. Step back. Now." My father didn't argue. He let the projector base fall to the ground with a loud clunk. My mother tried to say something, but the officer cut her off. "Ma'am, stay where you are. We have witnesses. Handcuffs clicked. My father didn't look at me. My mother glared like I'd ruined something precious. But as they were led away, I lay on the cold white floor, blood seeping beneath my ear, and all I could think was, this is what it took for the world to finally see. I spent 4 days in the hospital, drifting in and out of groggy consciousness beneath sterile lights and layers of gauze. The diagnosis was clear: a mild concussion, a scalp laceration requiring 9 stitches, and a contusion that would leave a scar near my temple. But the deeper damage had no name. The silence from my family was complete. No visits, no texts, no apologies. Only Julian came every day with flowers, puzzle books, and that steady, quiet presence I remembered from college. And it was Julian who introduced me to Brielle Morales, a lawyer who specialized in family abuse litigation. She was sharp composed and didn't flinch when I told her the full story. When I hesitated, "But they're my parents," she looked me straight in the eye. "Emily, she said your parents committed aggravated assault and conspired to coerce property from you. They didn't act like parents. You don't owe them silence." So I filed. The case made headlines fast. Bride's sister hospitalized after wedding assault, parents arrested at ceremony. The courtroom was packed on all 3 days of the trial. We had video footage from multiple guests, including Julian's clip and the live stream that had gone viral online. The slap, the confrontation, the swing, the blood, every second of it undeniable. Julian testified first firm and unshaken. He recounted what he saw, what he heard, and how he'd known Sierra and Nathaniel for years, but had grown wary of their obsession with appearances. Diana took the stand next. She spoke reluctantly, her voice trembling, but her testimony cut through the room like glass. She told me weeks before the wedding, Diana said of Sierra, that if Emily didn't hand over the house, they'd find a way to pressure her, that it was just strategic use of family ties. I didn't think they'd actually hurt her. Brielle didn't need theatrics. The evidence spoke for itself. When the judge returned with the verdict, I didn't breathe. Harold and Denise Rhodes are found guilty on all charges: aggravated assault, attempted coercion of property, and emotional abuse spanning multiple years. Sentenced to 6 years imprisonment without parole. My mother's mouth opened in protest. My father looked like stone. I sat still, hands folded, heart steady. Not because I won, but because for the first time in my life, the truth was louder than their version of me. After the verdict, I returned to my house in Bothell. For weeks, the living room still smelled faintly of hospital disinfectant from the gauze Julian brought, and my bedroom wall bore the shadow of where my emergency bag had leaned before the wedding. The house hadn't changed, but something inside me had. Julian came by often, not out of pity, but with gentleness that didn't ask for anything in return. He brought Thai takeout when I didn't have the strength to cook, and planted marigolds in the backyard because he read somewhere they repel bad energy. One evening, after we repainted the hallway, a warm sandstone color, he lingered near the kitchen island, uncharacteristically quiet. I turned off the music and looked at him. "I used to like you in college," he said, voice low. "But you always seemed like you were trying to disappear. And I didn't know how to reach someone who didn't think they deserved to be seen." I stared at him for a long time. I didn't smile. I didn't joke. I simply said, "Thank you for seeing me now." And I meant it. We didn't fall into romance overnight. It was slow, intentional. A shared cup of tea on rainy mornings, pruning hedges on weekends, quiet dinners without performance. Bit by bit, I stopped bracing for abandonment. I started hanging my favorite prints on the walls, not for display, but because I finally wanted to stay. That fall, I was invited to speak at a TEDx event in Tacoma themed "The Hidden Room, What We Don't Talk About at Home." I stood on stage in a burgundy dress, palms steady on the mic, and told my story not with bitterness, but with clarity. I spoke of silence, of being useful, but never loved, of what it costs to be the family's scaffolding. And then I told them what it meant to reclaim your name, your space, your right to exist fully. When I stepped off stage, someone in the front row, an older woman, had tears in her eyes. She mouthed, "Thank you." Later that night, back home, Julian and I sat under the string lights he'd hung across the porch. "You're not invisible anymore," he whispered. "No," I said, resting my head on his shoulder. "I'm home." 6 months after the trial, we launched the nonprofit. We called it Reclaim Shelter. It wasn't just a legal support center. It was a place where women who had spent their entire lives apologizing for their own existence could walk in, sit down, and not have to explain why they were tired. Julian handled the finances. Brielle volunteered her time to lead legal consultations. And I listened. Sometimes that's all they needed. Someone who understood what it meant to be told your value was conditional. Someone who'd stood in that silence and found her way through. The letters came slowly at first, then hundreds. From women in Nebraska, Ohio, Texas. From young girls in foster homes. From retirees who had never told their stories out loud. Your story helped me say no. I thought I was alone. Now I know I'm not. You gave me language for what I couldn't name. Each one made me pause, breathe, cry sometimes. One night, I sat on my living room floor and pulled out an old leather-bound notebook, something I hadn't opened in years. Inside was a page I wrote when I was 16. I just want to be seen. Just once. Like I matter. I stared at the words, tracing them with my finger. Then I smiled. Not because I was healed completely, some wounds become part of your bones, but because I had answered her. That girl in the shadows. She had survived, and now she was helping others do the same. On a Sunday evening, just before sunset, I stood in front of my house watching the light pour across the front yard. Julian was in the garden, trimming back the lavender. Inside, music played softly. The air was warm, quiet, whole. I looked at the wooden sign we had nailed to the fence post a few weeks earlier. It was simple, hand-carved, but every word meant everything. You are safe here. You are seen. You are enough. And I whispered it once more, not just for others, but for every part of me that once believed otherwise. For every woman still waiting to find her voice. You are not alone. Not anymore. Thank you so much for watching and staying with Emily's story until the very end. If her journey resonated with you even in the smallest way, we invite you to share your thoughts or your own experience in the comments below. Your voice matters, and you never know who might feel seen because of what you write. If this story touched your heart, made you reflect, or reminded you of your own strength, please consider subscribing to our channel. We share true, powerful stories like this every week because healing starts when we speak and hope grows when we're heard.